All right, so we've got a deep dive for you today on some really heavy news coming out of the Middle East.
Yeah, definitely a lot to unpack here.
We're talking about the Israel-Gaza conflict, obviously,
Yeah.
which, I mean, we all know has been, well, it's been a heavy year already, and
Yeah,
it's a
okay.
pretty major development.
It is.
So Yahya Sinwar,
Yahya
the
Sinwar.
leader of Hamas,
Right.
is dead.
Yeah, and I think what's really fascinating right off the bat is like where this news is breaking, which is TMZ.
I know. TMZ,
And
of all places, right?
TMZ. Yeah, so I mean right there it tells you this is a big deal. Like this isn't just, some kind of small potatoes thing. When TMZ is on it,
It's hit the mainstream.
it's hit the mainstream exactly. This
Yeah.
is a global story.
So, Sinwar,
Yeah.
for those maybe just joining us, catching up on this, remind us a little bit about who he was, what he represented, and why this is such a massive deal that he's gone.
Right. So, often when we think of like figureheads of organizations, you kind of think, well, how much power do they really have?
Right. Are they symbolic?
Symbolic, right. But in this case, Sinwar, he was a founder of Hamas's military wing.
Wow.
He's been the leader in Gaza since 2017.
Oh.
So this is someone who's deeply, deeply, entrenched in the organization, and he had a very hardline stance against Israel.
Yeah, and TMZ, they're not usually giving us like deep political analysis.
Right.
But they did mention the October 7th massacre.
Right, and that I think is really, it's kind of the keystone here because that was orchestrated under Sinwar's leadership,
Right.
and it was the single deadliest attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust.
Wow.
So this is something that really, took things to a whole other level, escalated the conflict tremendously, and put Sinwar really at the center of this conflict. So for him to be gone now, that is a massive, massive shift.
And do we know, how did he die?
Yeah, so he was killed during an operation by the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces in Gaza. And, adding to all of this, we live in a world where we see these things,
We
unfortunately.
see everything.
Everything. Photos of his body are circulating online. So, this is really, it's the real deal, and it's incredibly raw and kind of highlights the brutal nature of what's happening.
Photos online. I mean, that's chilling.
It is.
I mean, it's a chilling thing to even think about. It really just brings home the reality of what's happening over there.
Absolutely.
So, you've got this figure, he's gone. It does really make you think, though, what does this mean for the potential for peace? I know Netanyahu, he seemed to think this could be some kind of turning point. What are your thoughts?
Well, and that is the million-dollar question here, right? Because, Sinwar, he had rejected things like the two-state solution.
Right, which is, for anyone who needs a reminder, that's the idea of Israel and Palestine existing,
Coexisting
peacefully
no.
as independent states. Exactly.
Right. And he rejected that. He vowed to, liberate all of historical Palestine. And, that is just not something that was really, it made him, let's just say, a difficult partner in any kind of negotiation. Even within Hamas, there were probably people who are like, this is not helpful.
Yeah, like maybe a little too extreme, even
Right.
for, yeah.
Right, exactly. So the question is, does his removal, does that create space for different voices to come forward?
Right. Is this an opportunity?
Is this an opportunity? And if so, will those opportunities be taken? It's not as simple as, oh, well, he's gone and now everyone wants peace. We have to look at who might step into that power vacuum.
Exactly. Are there any names being floated around or potential successors and what they might be like?
Yeah, and this is where it gets even more complicated. There are a few names. You've got Salah al-Aruri, who is considered even more hardline than Sinwar.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe not the change we were hoping for.
Right. On the other hand, you've got Ismail Haniyeh, who, he might be a little bit more open to dialogue, but it's important to remember these are all individuals operating within a very complex system.
Absolutely. They have their own internal pressures, their own...
Exactly. And so to think that just because there's a change in leadership, everything is magically fixed, that's probably a little naive.
It makes you wonder, though, is this going to be another turn in the cycle of violence, or could this really be something different?
Right. And, you've got international pressure, too. You've got world leaders calling for de-escalation. Will they use this as an opportunity to push a little harder for some kind of peaceful resolution?
It really makes you think. Sinwar's death, it's huge, but is it actually going to change anything long term?
That's the big question. And I think something that's important for all of us to keep in mind, even as we, are glued to the headlines, glued to these updates, the underlying issues, the things that have been fueling this conflict for decades now, the land ownership, the security concerns, the political representation, that's all still there.
Exactly.
That hasn't gone anywhere.
And until those issues are addressed, is any lasting peace really possible? I don't know. Well, we'll certainly, I mean, this is a developing story, and we'll keep following it, obviously, very closely, but just some heavy, heavy stuff.
Yeah, a lot to think about, a lot to keep in mind.
Absolutely.